I'll be ranking the Song of Ice and Fire books at the end of this video, so stay tuned to see my ranking. Without further ado, let's get into this video. So I recently finished A Song of Ice and Fire, the main series, you know, that turned into Game of Thrones, a TV show, and it's a pretty big phenomenon. I recently finished the book series, or at least what's released of that. Of course, there are 2 more books that have been released, The Ones of Winter and I Dream for Spring, and we'll see if we ever do get those, as seeing the last book came out over a decade ago. So for all intents and purposes, I've finished the series, or what's of it. Now granted, I'm aware that there's some spin-offs I haven't read. It's The Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and there's like a history, or I haven't really looked into the spin-offs really. And I will get to them, I'll eventually read them, but I just haven't gotten to them yet, and I want to kind of branch out, read some other things before I get to them, but I will definitely get to them. My thoughts on the series as a whole. I mean, going into it, I had seen the TV show, I'd seen the Game of Thrones. I think I was actually on like season 7, maybe season 6, when I picked up the first book and started reading that. It's interesting having that context, because I know there have been plenty of people that have read it without that context, but I'm sure there's also been plenty with the context of the TV show. And so like I knew what was going to happen for the most part, at least until like we get further into the series. But like season 1 was pretty closely followed book 1. But even with that said, like I knew what was going to happen. I still really enjoyed the first book. Like it was really good. I like 10 out of 10. I loved A Game of Thrones, the first book, even though I knew what was going on. And I think a lot of that just came down to being able to see characters' thoughts and getting more depth to these characters, as in like getting to see their POVs and everything, what their thoughts are, what's going through their minds and all that, because it's just kind of a different angle. And also, I thought the first book had a much like better pacing. I thought it just went by a lot faster. It was like, and I love the TV show too. I'm not saying anything against the TV show, but I just thought the books kind of overall had some better pacing. In general, once I got further through the series, the pacing kind of like gets a little weird, because like Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons was originally supposed to be 1 and it was split into 2 and all that. So definitely some of the later books, the pacing gets not quite as tight as that first book. But overall, like I think the pacing was still fairly well done throughout the series. And that's one of the pros to reading the books, while like the TV show, sometimes it got a little slow. Still good, but I just feel like the books went by a little better. I mean, that said, with that, if you've been watching my reviews of these books, you will notice like A Storm for Swords and Feast for Crows, I did feel like dragged a little bit. But even though they dragged, like I still thoroughly enjoyed them, and this is definitely going to be a series that I'm going to be rereading. It's long, it's so long, but it was really good, and honestly, I can't wait to reread these books, because there's so many details I missed out on, I didn't catch, or just didn't quite fully understand. I know there's so much, because these books are big. There's a lot in them, so of course, first-time readers aren't going to catch everything. And so that's one thing I think I'm really excited to do a reread, is to just see all the little things I missed, and just re-experience it and see what else it has to offer. I'm also excited for a reread, just because like the first time I wasn't really speculating a lot much, because I'm just like reading it. The first time read, I'm just reading it, but on a second time read, I think because I know where the story goes a little bit more accurately, and I can pick up on all the subtleties and all the clues, and I can start theorizing a lot more, which I'm also super excited to get into. I've been watching so many YouTube videos about just like all the theories for Winds of Winter and all the different things, and yeah, I'm loving the theorizing going on. It's like one of the best parts about this, honestly.
The things I do for love.
Characters, phenomenal. These are definitely the most complex characters I've ever encountered in like any series, and that's amazing. As far as like standouts, favorite characters and all that, that's hard. I don't like, it's hard to pick a concrete like this character is my favorite. I have some that I really like. I really like Jon Snow, of course. I like Daenerys. She kind of grew on me. She was kind of all right in the first few, but with like Dance with Dragons, I really kind of started to enjoy her character with that one. I like Tyrion. I don't think I like him as much as I did in the show, and of course, like pretty much all the characters like the show, I like in the books too, like Davos and all the other minor characters, Samwell and all of them. But if I had to choose a favorite, that's really hard. I think I'd have to probably go with Jon Snow. I know, such a controversial take. No one likes Jon Snow. I'm kidding. Like, he's one of the most popular, of course. Um, like, I just really like his character, and the books kind of add a whole new dimension to him because in the books, he is all about his internal struggle because he's a bastard, but of course he wants not to be a bastard, and just that internal conflict over his duty versus what he wants, and he's constantly struggling with that. Like when Stannis offers to make him a Stark, and then he'll be like the King of Winterfell essentially, and just all that he grapples with that because he very much wants that, but of course that would contradict his sense of duty because he's already dedicated himself to the Night's Watch and he's Lord Commander, and he just can't betray his duty. And I think that's one thing why I like his character so much because he's very honorable, but in like not a detrimental way. As Ned Stark, he's honorable to a T. He's honorable for the sake of honor, which isn't always the best thing, as we see in the first book with, his head being chopped off. We see where that takes him, and it's because of his being honorable for the sake of honor that gets his head chopped off, because if it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have gone to Cersei and told him what he was doing, and ultimately that's what caused his downfall. I still love Ned Stark as a character, like he's great, but I think Jon Snow's approach on honor is just more realistic, I guess. Like, Jon Snow isn't necessarily honorable for the sake of honor. He's honor with, like, a purpose, if that makes sense. He dedicated himself to the Night's Watch. He's gonna stick to it. And he did forsake his vows. He, did the dirty with Ygritte. I always struggle pronouncing that name. And, like, that obviously contradicts his Night's Watch vows. He didn't stick to them, like, word for word to the T, but the sense of his vows and staying true to the Night's Watch and all that, like, I think he stuck to, which I think is more important. Like, when you pick your vows, like, word for word, finding all the loopholes, I think you're missing the point, because you should be taking like the overall context. And I think that's why I like Jon Snow character so much, because his honor is about that overall picture, I feel like. And I feel like that's how he's different from Ned Stark, which I think is just why I like his character so much. That said, I feel like I have to talk about Robb Stark, because I feel like, this is something that has been on my mind with these three characters, because Ned Stark, honorable to a T. He gets his head chopped off. And Robb Stark, love his character. Shamed he died, of course. Bro, the Red Wedding, that's a whole nother thing. Robb Stark was very much trying to live up to Ned Stark. And I think Robb was very much trying to emulate being honorable, which is a good thing, especially in this series. But I think Robb also kind of took it to that extreme. He's being honorable for honor's sake. And his whole marrying Jane Westerling, that's her name, right? I might be wrong. But like, marrying her is like honors for honor's sake. Yes, he's going back on his word against the phrase, but he did it because he slipped up. Him and Jane did the thing, and so he ends up marrying her for the sake of her honor, which I feel like it's hard to exactly explain this in words, but I feel like that whole thing and Robb's honor wasn't as extreme as like Ned Stark's, but it kind of definitely teeters more toward like being honorable for the sake of honor, like Ned Stark, and ultimately he pays the price for that. While I feel like Jon is like, I don't know, the better side. Like, he's honorable not just for the sake of honor, with an actual purpose. And I think his death is also like a great part of that, because I mean, that's a whole thing to get into, but his death is so great to his arc, because he gets the letter from Ramsay, we don't really know for sure, and so he decides to forsake his vows and go after Ramsay Bolton, and he tells the Night's Watch that, and I see this as betraying his sense of honor. Like, he's been honorable up to this point, and now his inner dilemma of his duty versus like what he wants, that we've been seeing throughout the whole series, it finally gets better of him at this moment, and he decides to go after Ramsay, and ultimately that's what gets him killed.
For the watch.
At least that's what I think. Maybe I'm super wrong, maybe I'm super off. If you think I am, feel free to comment below and tell me how I'm wrong. I'd love to hear your opinions. But this is just what I think about it, and I just think that's done super well. And of course, I'm fairly certain he's gonna be brought back. That's like almost confirmed. I feel like that he's gonna come back to life in some way. He's definitely not. He can't come back the same way, because that contradicts the rules of this world, which is a shame, because I don't want him to change, but also like he has to. But he's definitely gonna come back, and I think that's gonna be a big lesson for him, a needed lesson, of course, because he's always been struggling with his duty versus like his wants, and he's always chosen his duty. But I feel like with his character, his wants and duty, they're just gonna get bigger. Like they're just gonna get more extreme, and it's gonna be even harder for him to grapple with that dilemma. And we've even seen that throughout the series. Like book one, of course, he wants to be a Stark, he wants to be heir and all that, but like there's really no feasible way. Like there's nothing he can do about it, and so he goes to the Night's Watch, and then he joins the Wildlings, and he wants Ygritte, and he would like to become like a free man, but he's sworn himself to the Watch. You know, there's that dilemma, and then it just escalates even further. And Stannis offers him to make him a Stark and make him heir of Winterfell, everything he's ever wanted. But now he's Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He can't just leave. You know, his dilemma just keeps escalating, and I think we're just going to continue to see that, especially if the show turns out to be true. Like it's probably going to escalate. Like, oh, he's actually heir to the Iron Throne. Escalation, you know, and it's just going to keep escalating like that. And so eventually, of course, it was going to happen that he was going to take what he wants, and you know, like versus his duty. And I think that's better that it happens now before it really gets ramped up, because now that he's had that lesson, oh, if I don't stay true to my duty, I die. Like that's a powerful lesson. And so if he hasn't learned that, then he would have made the wrong decision further down the line, which would have been worse. But that's just my thoughts on it and his character. But ultimately, I think that's why I like his character so much. Is just that whole inner dilemma and what he does about it. I mean, other characters I like most of the characters, to be honest. Theon's arc is crazy. it's very similar to the TV show. But it's also just done really well. And I found myself empathizing with Theon quite a bit more in the books, I think, just because we were able to see like his actual internal struggle versus just watching it. And I think that was a lot more powerful. Tyrion, of course, Tyrion is Tyrion. He's great, awesome, gotta love him. I don't really got much to say about him. Yeah, he's good. I feel compelled to talk about Sansa. Honestly, I like her character. I think I've heard that like some people don't, but I like her. I think it's very interesting where she's going and like her journey. And I'm really eager to see more of her with Littlefinger up in the Vale and how she's learning from him and learning how to play the Game of Thrones. And I think that's such a cool place to take her character, and I can't wait to see what she does once she starts playing the Game of Thrones and how clever she can be, because she's literally being mentored by like the best player of it, or one of the best players. And so I can't wait to get more of her story, to see where that goes and what becomes of her character. I think she's probably going to end up being the downfall of Littlefinger, I feel like. Because Littlefinger is a very slippery character, and he's a very good player, but ultimately he'll bring destruction to the realm. So ultimately he needs to be defeated, but it doesn't seem like anyone can touch him, because he's just such good at playing the game. Varys is like the only one that even stands a chance, but Varys seems occupied with other plots that he is dealing with. And so Littlefinger definitely needs to be stopped, and I don't feel like anyone can really stop him. And so I kind of hope that Sansa learns from him. She becomes really good at the game, and I hope that she's the one that ends up defeating him, because I just feel like that would just go so well with her character and her story, and I think that would be a really interesting place to take her character. I mean, ultimately, that's kind of what she did in the series. It's just, it was done in a not so clever way. It was done kind of a stupid way in the TV show, but hopefully it'll be done better in the books. And ultimately, like, a lot of the things that happen in the show, I wouldn't mind if they happen in the books. Like some of where it goes and everything, as well as is done better. Like if Daenerys ends up going mad in the books, I could see that happening. I can see the seeds there. It just has to be done a lot better. Because in the show it was... really bad. But I can see that happening in the books, just if it's done better. And I think that honestly can be said for a lot of it, a lot that's in the show. It's like, I can see that being done, it just needs to be done better. And I guess I should talk about Daenerys. Her character, she was alright. And then A Clash of Kings, she like did nothing. She was barely in it, it felt like. I didn't really like her story then, but then once, I can't remember what her story was in Storm of Swords, to be honest, but when she gets to Meereen, mainly in A Dance of Dragons, and the whole situation where she's trying to take care of Marine and that whole thing, and with like Barris and Selmy coming into the mix, I just thought that was good. I really enjoyed that, which is the most I've enjoyed her story since the first book. Yeah, so I was enjoying her character toward the end, and I'm curious to see where it goes. I think her leaving off, being found by the Dothraki, don't remember exactly the Cal, but it's not her Dothraki, it's the like just regular Dothraki that have found her. I think that's a really good place to put her character, because it's kind of like tying up loose ends, because it may not seem like it, but there was a loose end of like the end of book 1. Dany hatches her dragons and she just leaves because the Khaleesi's are supposed to be taken back to I don't remember the Dothraki capital city name, but they're taken back to that place where they live out their days, and Dany avoided that. And I feel like in most series that wouldn't be a loose end, which is one reason I like Game of Thrones so much, because all those like small things that in regular series usually wouldn't be loose ends are still loose ends and will be taken care of, such as that whole Khaleesi, she's supposed to be taken back, and I think that's why it's so great that that's where her character left off on in this last book, because it's a neat way to kind of tie off that loose end and take care of that before she ends up going to Westeros. And I think similar to the show, she's going to end up taking all those Dothraki with her. I think that's probably gonna happen when she goes back to Westeros. That said, can't wait for her to get to Westeros. I can't wait for that. Can't wait for her to meet Tyrion. I really wish that happened in the last book, but it didn't. There's so much in this book. There's so much to talk about. I've been talking for a long time, and there's still so much more. It just keeps popping into my head. I'm like, I need to talk about Jaime. I need to talk about Cersei. And there's probably so many other characters. I mean, I've talked extensively about this in my other reviews. So if you really want to know some of my other thoughts about some of the characters I may miss in this video, go back and watch those. But I'll talk about Jaime because he's a standout. Of course, I'd seen the show, so I knew what his character's deal was and kind of where he was going, so I didn't hate him so much while reading the first and second book. But I've got to say, like, once I got to A Storm of Swords and got POVs of Jaime, those chapters were above and beyond. Like, his POV chapters were just so well done, so beautifully crafted, and it really took the series to like another level just with how well done his chapters were. And I always really enjoy a Jaime chapter. Anytime there's a Jaime chapter, it's always just really well done and really good. And he's definitely George R.R. Martin's best written character. And just seeing his journey, it's also such a good place for his character, because his character is all about like being the traditional knight, because the traditional knight, all about honor, has all these vows and
Defend the king, obey the king, obey your father, protect the innocent, defend the weak.
Jaime very much isn't that, at least at the beginning. But it's interesting because at his core, that's what he wants to be. He wants to be honorable. He wants to make a name for himself. But just because he was caught in a rock and a hard place between like killing the Mad King, you know, breaking his vows, or letting all of King's Landing be burned in dragonfire, like he was caught in that hard place, and ever since then, it's just honor has been impossible for him. And so he prides himself on being the best swordsman, like, and he never gets into trouble because he's the best swordsman in Westeros. He relies on that. That's his being. That's his person. And then he gets his sword hand chopped off. And that was such a clever thing to do with his character, because now that he's missing the thing that he built his own whole like identity around, his whole outside appearance on, is being such a good sword fighter. Now that that's gone, what does he do? So he goes back to that honor, you know, his core, and wanting to be honorable. And it's really cool to see him when he does try to become honorable. And him pairing him up with Brienne was a perfect way to do that, because as much as he rubbed off on her, she rubbed off on him. And so now he has like a different view of what honor is. And it kind of goes back to the whole Jon Snow, Ed Stark conversation, is like, how good is it to actually be honorable? And Jaime is kind of a whole different perspective of that, because it's like, okay, you should try to uphold your vows, you should try to be good and keep your vows, but at the end of the day, if you can't, or if it's better to break them, like, you got to do the right thing, kind of thing. That's very simple terms. It's a lot more complicated than that, but I think that's one reason why Jaime is such another likable character, or like one of a lot of people's favorite character in the series, is just because that's a whole nother essay about honor and what does it mean to be honorable. And it's just such another interesting look into that whole topic. All right, I'm gonna move on from characters. I know there's tons of characters, but I could be here literally all day if I wanted to talk about all of them, so I'm gonna move on from that.
The Iron Throne is mine, by right. All those that deny that are my foes.
The story is so good. I just love how it's so character driven. Like everything that happens, it's because of the characters. And I just love how there's consequences. That kind of goes into the story, and it being character driven is just because there's consequences for every minuscule thing anyone does. And people are punished accordingly for their decisions, you know? Like Robb Stark forsaking marrying a different woman, and then the Red Wedding, which is that I should probably make that a whole topic in and of itself. And there are just such consequences, and it's so daring, as a lot of other series really aren't. Like characters have plot armor in other series, and minuscule things don't really have a big consequence, and characters aren't really punished in other series and stuff. In this one, it just flips all that on its head. Every character is punished. There's consequences for the smallest of choices, and there's everything matters. No one has plot armor. No one's safe. Like you have to be smart or skilled. Like if you're alive for a reason in this world. And I think that's one of the main appeals to this series, is just all that realism that's added into this. Like now when I read or watch anything else, I just can't help but thinking, like, you know, the character will do something, and I just can't help but thinking there should really be some bigger consequences to that choice that the show or book just doesn't address. So that's one thing that's probably always going to be ruined for me since reading this series, but no worries. I think that's probably a good thing. And that's just what this makes this story so good, is because of those consequences and everything. And it's because there are actual consequences to every single decision. Because of that, it makes the story character driven, and it takes it in so many different ways that you could have never guessed, just because of all those consequences. Like it takes so many twists and turns, and that's part of the reason why this story is so good, is just because it's at its core, it's character driven. Of course, it's a lot more complicated than that, as this whole series is a big series. There's 5 books out, each of them pretty much 1,000 pages, and there's still 2 more on the way. So there's a lot in these books. It's not a simple series at all. It's very complicated, which I enjoy. I mean, Star Wars is like my favorite franchise ever, especially the prequels. That's kind of what I grew up with, and all the politics that happen in those, for as much as the prequels get hated on for those politics, because I grew up with that in the Clone Wars. I very much like politics in like the media I consume, and so like Game of Thrones is all politics pretty much. That's all it comes down to, is the politics for wanting the throne and all that. And so I'm a sucker for that. I love all those politics and all of that. I don't remember the point I was making with that, but it's very political, and I like that. Well, the Red Wedding, that was something. Never seen that ever before, ever in all of fiction, ever. And you betcha when I watched that in the TV show, it hurt me. It hurt my soul. I mean, if you've seen my Attack on Titan video, you'll know that there's only 2 times in all of fiction where I've had that feeling, where I've actually, like, it hurts my soul. The Red Wedding is one of them. The other happens in Attack on Titan. You can watch my Attack on Titan video for that. But like, there's just no other way to describe this event, the Red Wedding, because I didn't know anything about it. The only thing I knew is that there was an event called the Red Wedding. All I knew. And it hurt my soul, like, because I watched it firsthand. And after I watched it, I couldn't watch another episode. I had to put my phone away. I was actually at work at the time. But I had to put my phone away and get up. I took a bathroom break, but I had to just take a break. I just had to what was that? I was like, what was it that I just watched? That was crazy. And I think the testament that something can make me feel that way, where it literally feels like it hurts my soul, the testament that it can do that just shows how great of a story this is, how great the characters are, how skilled the author is, and just overall how amazing this series is. Because I obviously have to be attached to these characters to feel that way. And it's just such a big event that I've never seen anything like it before. And it's just really well done. As terrible as it is, damn, that was awesome. And of course I watched it first. So of course when I was reading the books, I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen in the 3rd book. And while reading the 3rd book, I was very much prepared for that. So much so that once I actually finally got to the chapter that it happens, I almost I had to distance myself. I kind of distanced myself from the story because I didn't want to get hurt again like I did while watching it. Um, and so I can't really say whether the show or book was better just because I had to distance myself while reading it because I did not want to feel that way again because it hurts. It's such a powerful scene and it's so terrible, but it's also awesome. I love it because it can make me feel that way, and it just shows how great of a writer the author is, I think. And it's such a big unexpected twist that I just really shows the balls that the series has. And that's just another reason that makes it so great, is because this show will do stuff like that. And I hope there's more as things like that in this series in the next 2 books. So yeah. Okay, last thing I'll talk about before I get to the ranking. Just where I think the series is gonna go, my predictions and everything. As minimal as they are, because like I said, I was reading it, like I wasn't really thinking about the future predictions or theories while I was reading it. I was just like trying to enjoy the story, which I did. But as for my theories, my predictions, so Winds of Winter, I don't think Stannis is actually dead. And I think Stannis and his army will actually end up taking Winterfell. Will end up winning that battle. I'm fairly certain of it. And I think it'll just come down to like the other houses in the north, like all the small things I think are just adding up to Stannis' side. And I know there's like a grand conspiracy or a grand north conspiracy theory. I actually don't know the theory, but just from the name alone, I can kind of guess what that theory is. And I think I believe it to an extent. I think some of the houses in the north will end up joining Stannis because of what the Boltons did and how they killed their king and everything. I think they'll end up like siding with Stannis, and somehow that's gonna play into Stannis taking Winterfell. And so I'm fairly certain that Stannis is gonna win that. And I just really don't think Stannis is gonna die, just because he's definitely not quite done with his character. There's at least something a little bit more with his character. I can just tell that. I'm not sure exactly what that is. I think it has something to do with Melisandre and the prophecy and what Azor Ahai, or however you say that. Just kind of like the hero that was promised, or whatever it's called. I think Stannis has something to do with that because Melisandre thinks he's that one. Whether he is or not, that's up for debate, but he definitely has a part to play with that prophecy, I think. So I don't think we're done with his character. As for, there's so much more, because there's like gonna be, what, 4 battles in the next book or something, like one with Winterfell, the one at Marine, which I don't know what to think about that. I saw some theories about it. I think it is fairly likely that Barristan Selmy will die in that battle, which is probably fair. If I was writing, that's probably what I would do, just because George R.R. Martin is balancing a lot of characters at this point, so he needs to kill some of them off. I really have no idea what's going to happen with King's Landing. I don't know what's going to happen there until Dany shows up with her dragons, of course. And then there's the one guy that claims to be, is that Aegon Targaryen? The kid that claims to be Rhaegar's son, the one that the mountain supposedly killed. Honestly, I kind of hope he's not a Targaryen, because I feel like if Jon also turns out to be a Targaryen, oh, that's a lot of Targaryens right there. And so I think it'd be cool if, I think it's Aegon. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it'd be cool if he's actually a pretender, and not actually a Targaryen. That's kind of what I hope it goes with it, but I really don't know. He could very well end up being the actual Aegon Targaryen. And of course, like I said, I haven't really done much theorizing. I think what I have done theorizing with is just the whole Stoneheart and Brotherhood thing. That's crazy. I've heard quite a few theories with that. And honestly, I really think that they're gonna do their own like Red Wedding, but to the Freys. I think that's really kind of what it's looking like it's gonna be, and what it looks like it's gonna happen is that they're gonna do a Red Wedding for the Freys, give them like revenge, a taste of their own medicine. And I think that ultimately that's why Jaime is being brought to them. I don't think they're actually gonna kill Jaime. I think they're gonna use him to implement in that plan, because the wedding, because the Freys are gonna have a wedding. I think it's one of the Freys to some Lannister, and so of course if they can use Jaime, get Jaime on their side, and use him to their advantage, they can do like a Red Wedding on them. So ultimately, that's kind of what I think they're up to. We really haven't seen much of them. They've kind of been in the background this whole time, and I think that's almost more proof that they're gonna do this, because they're purposely put in the background so that we're not aware of this plan, I think. But ultimately, I think that's what it's gonna happen. The Freys are definitely gonna probably all be killed in some way, though. They're gonna be punished for breaking guest right and all that. Like, there's no way they're not. By the end of the series, probably the House Frey will probably be completely destroyed, and some other house will have to take the towers that they have. And then Dany will come back to Westeros with their dragons and her armies, and the White Walkers are gonna come and yeah, that's about all my predictions I have, to be honest. On my second read, I'll definitely be looking at a lot more of those clues and theorizing a lot more. Honestly, this is hard. I don't know how to rank them because they're just all so good. So I'll start with my least favorite, my number 5 spot, which has definitely got to be A Feast for Crows. Like, honestly, I enjoyed it. I liked getting Cersei POVs and just seeing like what's up with her, and she's got a lot up with her, and I still really enjoyed A Feast for Crows. It's still good. I mean, all these books are good, but ultimately when it comes down to it, I think Feast for Crows is my least favorite just because it seemed like it kind of dragged, and other than the Cersei chapters, I just felt like there wasn't really much going on with it. Cersei was kind of like holding the book up, like she was definitely the best part of it, and the rest was just kind of like dragging. Still, I still really enjoyed the book. I just think it's the weakest one. At my number 4 spot, I probably have to put A Dance with Dragons. I hate putting it that low. I really loved A Dance with Dragons, and I hate that I have to put it in my number 4 spot because it's still a really good book, and I really liked what was happening with Marine. I really liked what was happening with John's character. I think Dany and John were really kind of like the two pillars holding this book up, and ultimately, I didn't really feel like this one dragged a lot. I think what comes down to it is just, it feels like this book isn't finished. It feels like some of the characters could have had a bit more added to their story, and it just feels like this one's kind of unfinished a little bit. If it was finished, I think it definitely would have been ranked higher. At my number 3 spot, I've got to put A Storm of Swords. Super good, and once you get to that halfway point, once you get to the Red Wedding, it picks off with like just the biggest things to happen. There's the Red Wedding, the fight on the wall against the wildlings, Joffrey's wedding and his death, Tyrion's trial and all that. It's so much happens, and so many characters are just at the thrown to the forefront and really tested in this book, in A Storm of Swords. And so ultimately, I really love that one. The only thing against it is just that first half felt like it was kind of slow, and it wasn't until about you get to about the halfway point where it really picks up, and then it's just like bam, 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 bam. If this book just consisted of like the halfway point forward, it would be number 1, definitely. It's just that first half that kind of drags it down. So my number 2 spot is A Game of Thrones, the first one. Super good. Of course, it's almost 1-for-1 first season of the TV show, but it's just excellently paced, excellent story. Everything about it is just excellent. I can't think of a single thing wrong with it. It's just perfect. I guess the only thing wrong with it is 1-for-1 of the show with season 1. Like I knew everything was gonna happen. That's not a detriment. I still think it was really good. I mean, I'm placing it in my number 2 spot. But yeah, it's just, I already knew everything. It wasn't different at all. And with that said, number 1, A Clash of Kings. I don't think I've ever seen anyone rank this book at their number 1 spot, but I absolutely love this book. I thought it was everything great about the first book, but with added stuff that wasn't in season 2, which I thought was amazing. I actually really like this book, and I think this is a hot take, but I think it just had the best story, like from beginning to end, the best through line, and the best like pacing throughout. Add all the good of the pacing from the first book with just a more interesting story, I think, and that was just because it was a bit more unique. It was just different enough from the show that I'm like, oh, this is new stuff. And so yeah, I've got to put A Clash of Kings on my number 1. That's probably a hot take. You can tell me why I'm wrong in the comments, but that's just my ranking. If I read through them again, maybe this will change, but as for right now, that's my ranking. If you like this video, if you like hearing my thoughts about Game of Thrones, I'm sure there will be plenty more Game of Thrones videos from me. I'm not even close to being done with this series. I mean, there's the spin-off books I have to read still, and theorizing I could do. This is such a complex series that there's so much more that I can talk about, and I'm sure I will talk about it a lot more. So if you enjoyed this video, hearing my thoughts about it, feel free to subscribe and like. You know, it just helps out, and I appreciate it.